controls your access to healthcare. That's why we don't want government providing healthcare. We don't want government controlling our access. We don't want government telling us what medicines we can't take. And we don't want government telling us what medicines we must take. And we don't want government telling us what insurance we have to buy either. We don't want government involved in our health. They have no authority under the Constitution to do so. If you want to do that, get a constitutional amendment. Let's have that discussion in public with we the people. Let us debate that. But they didn't do that. They just did it with an executive order. And so President Trump undid some of that. Now we have a group of liberal establishment Republicans, Lamar Alexander from Tennessee, Patty Murray is a Democrat from Washington, and they're working with John McCain, Republican Arizona, Susan Collins, Republican of Maine, and all of them are trying to extend a critical Obamacare payments to insurers for 2 years. 2 years. Well, that may be shut down by Mitch McConnell. It may not come to the floor. Let's hope that that's the case. If Mitch McConnell is going to do anything, he has to block this attempt by John McCain and other establishment Republicans to keep Obamacare on life support. That's right. Obamacare is critically ill, and they're going to try to keep this thing going by continuing the theft and the fraud. I mean, this is what they're putting out there. It's absolutely amazing. And as the Hill points out, 2 holdouts on the GOP effort to repeal Obamacare are throwing their support now behind a bipartisan deal to extend payments to insurers after President Trump moved to nix them. So these establishment shills, they want to keep Obamacare at all costs. John McCain and Susan Collins are now going to try to keep this theft scheme to fund Obamacare. They're going to try to keep this thing going. Isn't that amazing? I guess it isn't. You shouldn't be surprised by that. I'm David Knight. Stay with us. We've got more real news coming up right after the break. We're going to tell you about the missing security guard.
Enjoy all natural bath and beauty products with SDA.
And it will be where we take all of their assets. We'll get there. But they made a big mistake by doing it first because it's not very efficient. Let me give you an idea of why it's not very efficient. Not very efficient for us. How Obamacare fuels the obesity epidemic. This is an article from fmshooter.com. Say there's a troubling report released Friday by the Center for Disease Control and Prevention shows that almost 40% of American adults and nearly 20% of adolescents are obese. So they constantly harangue us about obesity and about the sugar that we consume and so forth and so on. You've heard about that, right? But under the Affordable Care Act, yeah, let that irony ring out there for you. I just talked about insurance premiums increasing from 2.5 to 5 times over a couple of years. That's not, you can't sustain that. It's not affordable. Under the ACA, the only questions an insurer can ask about a prospective patient are their age, their smoking status. End of story. He said, I was previously under the impression that under the ACA, insurers could charge higher premiums to women as they use health services far more frequently than men, but gender rating is actually illegal under the ACA. That's one of the reasons why you have somebody holding a gun to your head if you are a single male, holding a gun to your head so that you can have maternity care or abortions when that does not apply. See, that is socialism for you. That is socialized medicine or socialized health insurance. We should put it that, which is a precursor to government takeover of all of our healthcare, what they call single-payer system. He says before Obamacare, an insurer would have charged a much lower premium to a healthy guy and a much higher one to the obese guy if they chose to cover him at all. Without being able to assess the risk of individual customers, the healthy customer ends up paying more while the obese customer ends up paying less. Under Obamacare, a 30-year-old male with a body mass index of 18 who works out 5 to 6 days a week, eats as healthy as possible, has absolutely no health problems whatsoever, ends up paying the same amount of premiums as a 30-year-old male who is 600 pounds, eats two pizzas and drinks 2-liter sodas daily, and has been previously told by his doctor that he needs to lose weight or he's going to be at risk for heart disease and diabetes. So it's not insurance. It's an entitlement program. And it doesn't even, as the CDC wrings its hands about health epidemics that to some degree we can do something about. I understand that there's some obesity issues that are genetic. It's not all what you do, but certainly the incentive to try to minimize your genetic disposition to a condition, that incentive is taken away. And you are charged the maximum that insurance companies can get away with because they're the people who wrote the laws. Let's take a look at this fake poll about Alabama. And it made the Drudge Report. Fox News put it out. Oh, we can trust Fox News, right? They're a conservative organization. Well, not necessarily. As Breitbart points out, it's Murdoch's network. And this may be very fake news, a very fake poll. The poll that got everybody's attention shows Judge Roy Moore, who is a Republican, very conservative Republican, who has a very loyal base. He probably starts out every election with 30%. Because these are people who not only strongly support his stands, he was removed twice from being Chief Justice of the Supreme Court in Alabama. Once because he put up a monument to the Ten Commandments, says people need to understand what the foundation of our law is here in America. And of course, now we have just the opposite. We got people tearing down the foundation, monuments to the foundation of our country. But he put that up there and they said, no, you got to take it down. He goes, no, you don't have any authority to make me do that. So they removed him. Then the people elected him again to the same position. And when he was Chief Justice and the laws started coming through about gay marriage, he said, the federal government doesn't have any authority to do that. We have Alabama laws under the 10th Amendment, and we have the Alabama Constitution under the 10th Amendment that defines marriage as between one man and one woman. And under the 10th Amendment, the federal government doesn't have any authority to do that. And we've had a lot of honest lawyers who have said that. People who actually support gay marriage and said the way that this was done is very troubling from a legal standpoint because the Supreme Court should not be legislating from the bench based on what they feel is a majority view in the country. they should be respecting the laws of individual states. And that's what Judge Roy Moore said. He said, I'm not going to do that. So they removed him a second time. So he's got a very loyal base of people there. And it is a Republican state, a Republican seat. And yet Fox News said, look, 42%. Well, I looked at that and I thought, well, Mitch McConnell has done his work, hasn't he? He couldn't, with all the negative attacks that he put against Judge Roy Moore, he couldn't do anything to help Luther Strange. Luther Strange had big ethical issues, very big ethical issues. He was tainted by the way that he was put into office by the individual who later had to step down from office. And he had been the person who was investigating this corrupt governor who appointed him. that's an issue right there. And then he had ethical issues of his own. But he was a darling of the GOP establishment, perhaps because of his ethical issues. And so they did everything they could to support him. Now, they couldn't attack Judge Roy Moore on the issues because he was with the people on the issues. He was with Trump on the issues. So they attacked him personally. So I looked at that and thought, well, maybe they have damaged him for this primary. But I think there's something else going on here. As Breitbart looks at this, they point out that the guy who ran this poll is part of a Democrat polling organization. Christopher Anderson, a Democrat strategist who worked for John Kerry, interestingly enough. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to play up Democrat hopes. Do you think that the Democrats who have poured so much money, we have seen record amounts of money poured into some congressional races that have occurred to replace people who have moved in the Trump administration, do you think they're going to come in hot and heavy to try to shut down Judge Roy Moore? Do you think that maybe Fox News and Rupert Murdoch's organization would like to help the GOP establishment make sure that Judge Roy Moore doesn't go to Washington? That they would put out a phony poll? Here's how phony their poll was. The sample had 44% Democrats, even though in general Democrats only make up 28% of the population. They had 45% Democrats. Republicans, and there were 37%. Usually it's 25% Republicans in general in the population, but only 19% of those who are independents, and there are 45% who are independent. So they skewed this away from independents.
Super Blue fluoride-free products. InfoWars Life brings you a revolutionary toothpaste blend with iodine and nano silver. Does that mouthwash and
at a price each with known organic concentrated herbs to create the basic
code Wake Up at checkout to get 20% off InfoWars Wake Up America. Great tasting coffee. Love it. Let's go to the sessions on Capitol Hill. Let's pick up that feed.
I want to hear about the firing of FBI Director James Comey. President Trump initially said he fired Director Comey based on
I want to hear about the imprisonment of Comey and Hillary Clinton and Mueller and some of these other people who let this uranium deal go through when they knew about bribery, fraud, and corruption and money laundering.
NBC News that he actually fired Comey because of, quote, the Russia thing, end quote. It's also been reported that the day before he fired Director Comey, President Trump summoned his top advisors and told him that he had prepared a termination letter. It's important, I believe, to understand what role you had in this process, including conversations with the president and others in the White House. Last week,
in other words,
the Democratic members of this committee
maybe we should ask those questions about the people running the Russian investigation and what they knew and when they knew about uranium
firing at this hearing, and that we expected answers or the assertion of a valid claim of executive privilege by the president. In conclusion, Attorney General, your department, as you know, is incredibly important, and you are as well. Our country depends on a department that's independent, committed to protecting the rights and freedoms of all Americans, not just some. So
why has the FBI got a non-disclosure agreement on a whistleblower to expose racketeering and corruption between Hillary Clinton and Vladimir Putin?
I'd like to swear you at this point. Do you affirm that the testimony you're about to give before the committee will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing?
We've had these guys get sworn in, as we see him getting sworn in. They swear in at these testimonies, and yet when they give contradictory testimony, they not only don't go to jail, but they're not supposed to be fired either, like Comey.
Get a copy of your opening remarks. I was wondering if it'd be possible for you to submit your longer remarks and maybe summarize so we can get the questions sooner. But I'll defer to you, but that's my request. But whatever time you need, take it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity to be with all of you, Ranking Member Feinstein and distinguished members of the committee, former colleagues and friends. I appreciate this opportunity. It's an honor of a lifetime. You have to know for me to serve as Attorney General of the United States of America. You can understand and know that with my 15 years in that department and my 20 years in this committee with oversight of that department, I understand the august responsibilities I have and the duties that I have to undertake, and I'll do my best every day to be worthy of the trust you placed in me. Every single day, the men and women of the Department of Justice work to protect our national security against terrorist threats, defend our civil rights, reduce violent crime, stop deadly drug dealers, and strengthen the rule of law. And so today, I'd like to share some thoughts about what we are doing, give you insight into the exciting activities that are ongoing. The Department of Justice...
Okay, this doesn't sound too exciting. This sounds like a boilerplate speech that he's had there. There's not going to be kind of interaction between Jeff Sessions and Dianne Feinstein. So we'll give you the highlights about that tomorrow when it comes out. Hopefully we would have some kind of a back and forth about DACA, something about a back and forth with civil forfeiture regulations. That's the thing where the government can come in and steal your stuff without ever finding you guilty. They don't even have to charge you with a crime. They call it civil forfeiture. They don't call it theft. They steal the money from the Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac investors. They call it a net asset sweep. We call it theft. They come in and they take your car or your home because they say, well, somebody in that car had a joint or your son was smoking a joint on the porch, so we're going to take the family home. Or you've got a guy who was flying a couple of businessmen in a suit from the U.S. to Canada and then back again. And they come and say, we know that you didn't know that it was a drug deal. These guys just look like executives doing a corporate meeting. But it was a drug deal, and so we're going to take your plane. And so the government, so the U.S. government versus Learjet, serial number, blah, blah, blah. And this guy is now out of business. They didn't charge him with anything. No, it was the plane that committed the crime. The plane must go to detention or be used by a local police department or the federal government's law enforcement officers who like to ride around in it like they're Miami Vice or something, okay? Remember that program that was so popular? They had all those wonderful sports cars and speedboats that they had collected from people and they could use for their own personal use? Okay, that's how they got it. They stole it from people. Now, some of those people were drug dealers, and that's fine if you want to take that stuff from drug dealers after you convict them of a crime. But then they took that program and they expanded it to other people. And now Jeff Sessions says that he wants to expand that. And then the other part of this is what's going on with DACA. These are foreign citizens who were brought here by their families, but somehow their families cannot take them back home to their home country, even after we have provided them with a free education. No, we're going to find a path to make them legal. Oh, it won't be amnesty. They won't get citizenship yet. Yeah, that's the lie that we're hearing. There's absolutely no way that Americans are going to allow a double standard. You're going to hear all these sob stories. Oh, I'm here, but I can't do this. I can't do that because I'm not a citizen. It's like, yeah, well, you weren't a citizen, but you got a free education. And you don't have to go home. So, yeah, all right, we'll give you the right to vote. And then along with that citizenship will come chain migration. You can bring in all of your relatives from whatever country you came from. They're all going to be able to come in, and they'll be able to vote as well. And the Republicans will have nice, cheap labor as well. And we can replace all of those people who really understand what's going on here in America and who really aren't down with socialism. We can replace them with people who are loyal servants of the state. All right, coming up in the next segment, we're going to be talking to Simon Roche. He is the head of the Office of the HQ, the world's largest non-state civil defense organization. He's trying to defend people that the government of South Africa has targeted for extinction. That's right, genocide. And they are the ultimate preppers. They're banding together to protect their lives, not just their property. As the government says, they're going to take both, and they brag about it. So stay with us. We're going to be talking to him right after the break.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, we're running the biggest special we've ever had for our best-selling product, Brain Force, now Brain Force Plus. There's 20% more in each bottle. And we're now purchasing so much of it from the major organic manufacturer here in the United States, we've been able to get it for less. So I'm offering for the first time ever 50% off. And I thought I could offer this for maybe a month. I'm going to have to stop this special within a week because it is blasting out of our warehouse because the fans of it already are stocking up. They know how great it is. A whole bunch of organic, natural, healthy, known nootropics. And if you want good, clean, focused energy, then Brain Force is for you, and you're supporting the broadcast at the same time. It's a good deal at $39. It's $19.96 at InfoWarsLife.com or simply call toll-free 888-253-3139.
Men, give your body the support it needs with InfoWars Life Prostagard. It's time to start assisting the body in regulating proper prostate balance. InfoWars Life has set out to bring you formulations that are not only the highest quality out there, but formulas that you can use on a daily basis to give your body the natural herbs and extracts that our experts recommend. The Prostagard formula does just that, with its mixture of plant-based nutrients and antioxidants that help give your body total support. It's a hand-selected blend of saw palmetto, lycopene, plants, and within it, the global news. Talked about frequently in the U.S. It's not politically correct to talk about black racism against white people. It's not politically correct to talk about the genocide of white people by a black majority government, but that's what's going on in South Africa. Racism is racism and genocide is genocide, and we're going to talk about it whether it's politically correct or not, because I don't really care about the skin colors of the people who are doing the wrong thing. Genocide is wrong, racism is wrong. We're going to be talking to Simon Roche. He is the head of the Office of the HQ. Now, this is interesting because this is a group that's come together. It's a non-state group. It is a civil defense organization, and I'm going to let him lay out for you the dire straits that they're in. The fact that they have the president of the country right now, Jacob Zuma, is essentially calling on people and singing songs that say, kill the white farmers, take their land. They're approving this. They're saying they're not going to prosecute anybody that kills white people. And we have seen reports of amazing brutality, stuff that you typically see in the drug wars in Mexico. But it is racially motivated. It is motivated by people who are also communists, part of the ANC. And according to his biography here, it says that Simon Roche was once an ANC activist. I want to ask him about that. Of course, that's the party of Nelson Mandela. It is the party of Jacob Zuma right now. He is no longer part of that. You can find him on Suidlanders.org. If I'm pronouncing that correctly, Simon is Suidlanders. It actually means Southlanders. And he is Afrikaans. So thank you for joining us, Mr. Roche.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me, Mr. Nutt.
Let's talk a little bit about what's going on there. Lay out where the Afrikaans came from. They've been there as long as we've had people here in the United States who came here to settle from Europe. I'm not talking about Christopher Columbus, but I'm talking about the settlers that we had who came over in the 1600s from England, who settled in Plymouth Rock in the early 1600s and so forth. That's about the time that people from other parts of Europe, people, the Huguenots and the Calvinists who had fled religious persecution, they went to South Africa, and they've been there about 400 years, right?
Yeah, that's correct. They established the first settlement on the 6th of April, 1652, and they were comprised primarily of three religious groups. That is to say that the Dutch at the time were very famous for their pious Calvinism. They were joined by French people who went there as Huguenots, not as French, and subsequently by German Lutheran soldiers demobilized after the 30 Years' War, or a knock-on effect of that. And so it's a culture that is steeped in Africa. It's a gene pool that is amalgamated to form one of the strongest gene pools in the world, very famously so, as some Indian scientists revealed not so long ago. So there's a lot of integrity to the people, the culture, the tradition, the language, and the religion.
Now, what happened, and of course, everybody in the United States, they paid a great deal of attention when there was apartheid. After that ended, basically, Americans haven't paid any attention for the last, I guess, when did that end? That was early 90s, was that when that ended? 1994, okay. So for the last 20 or so years, nobody's really paid much attention to that here in the United States. But now the guy who shared a Nobel Peace Prize with Nelson Mandela, F.W. de Klerk, and that'll be a familiar name to those of us who are watching it under apartheid, he set up an agreement with Nelson Mandela. They transitioned from an apartheid, which was a rigid segregation of the different races, to a rainbow nation democracy. They said now he has come out, and he has said that President Zuma is determined to accelerate our descent along the road to state capture, economic crisis, and racial confrontation. That's F.W. de Klerk, again, the co-recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize, along with Nelson Mandela, for ending apartheid. He accused the ruling establishment of being openly hostile to white people based on negative racial stereotypes. Let's talk about what the form of that open hostility has taken in South Africa against white farmers.
Well, you know, there's a broad array of what are known as broad-based black economic empowerment laws. In other words, affirmative action laws. And those affirmative action laws have created a scenario in which it's not in the interests of a commercial entity to have white employees, or it is in their interest to have as few as possible. And I think that was perhaps the beginning of the scenario that you've just described. For many white people, it was their first experience of being sort of excluded from realizing their full potential within the South African body politic. The laws specifically encourage employers to have more people of certain colors if they want to get contracts with the government. And in any modern economy, anywhere in the world, the state, the government, is the largest purchaser of goods and services. So you can imagine the immediate ramifications of that. And that was coupled with a drastic increase in crime that led to our Minister of Police stating in the year 2007 that if white people don't like the levels of crime in South Africa, they should leave. And I think that it was at that point that many white people in South Africa began to realize that much of the rhetoric of the African National Congress in the early 90s, prior to assuming power on the 27th of April, 1994, and subsequently, and their acolytes, the liberals and the academic elites and others who always said that the African National Congress was a benevolent force that could do no wrong, really, was a load of nonsense. It became apparent around about then. Subsequently, the police determined not to release crime statistics based on the actual crime. In other words, you can read about violent crimes, but it's difficult to get statistics on farm murders, for example. And similarly, not to release statistics based on race. Now, any of you who's watching this can think for themselves what the implications of that are. It means that it's almost impossible for anybody to construct a truthful narrative about the severity of what's happening in South Africa. This sort of Marxist manipulation or control of information has led to a scenario where we, as Statelanders, the world's largest non-state civil defense organization, have had to work with other people to compile our own statistics, always conservatively, always cautiously, so that we don't get caught out. And the results